Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. And E3 is over. I figured I'd do an experiment here and just start with the big news right at the front. I think I'm doing this mostly to mock the idea that I could possibly ever break news, though, in all fairness, because me saying E3 is over now at noon on December 13th, when the information came out yesterday at about, I would imagine 10 or 11 in the evening, maybe even a little bit earlier there, just really highlights that I would never really break news. And even if I did break news, if I jumped into a live stream as soon as I'd heard the news, I wouldn't really have anything to say about it, which is probably the second mocking thing I'm doing today, which clearly I'm in a weird mood, in that, yeah, there's really not a lot to say there. We all saw it coming. It was either going to be one of two scenarios. I guess there's an outside shot that E3 would have come back strong, but most assumed that it was just going to either continue to churn on and stayed at the same level of quality or get worse, or it was going to just continue to cancel itself over and over again. Now, the big issue here certainly is that the ESRB, for better or worse, was making a lot of money through E3, which means now almost certainly the ESRB does not want to admit, even if they are technically a non-profit lobbyist group, which they probably are technically a non-profit, they're not going to want to lose that money that they could be using for lobbying, as far as for video games. So the ESRB giving out the ESRB ratings of video games, the fee for that, is almost certainly going to go up to make up for the difference in which they were getting money for selling booth space at E3. Either that, or somebody's going to have to come up with something else that E3 or the ESRB can do to make some money. I suppose there is potentially an idea where E3 could have been split in 2, 3, or even 4 yearly events, but I don't know what really would have happened there. If anything, I think the trade-off here is probably the right way to go, in that now we effectively have the Game Awards, Video Game Awards, pretending to be like the Oscars, but also doing what E3 did in a lot of cases, as far as announcing and showing a bunch of trailers, which, yeah, on that level, I should probably jump into a game pretty quickly here. I imagine what we'll see is that for the small group of industry people, the people that like work at GameStop and Walmart, that would potentially order video games or want to see video games that they might want to order, will probably just go to the Game Awards and then have secret meetings in the hotel rooms around before or after the Game Awards, which is what basically was happening at E3 too, is that as soon as E3 introduced the idea of letting the public in, it stopped becoming this inside industrial thing, and you probably will see a bit of a split, in which game developers will go to some game developer events to rub elbows with other game developers and talk about programming and designing games, and then there'll be the Game Awards on top of several other smaller events, Nintendo Direct type events, that will allow more trailers to be released more often throughout the year, which is definitely the better thing. This does open up the possibility for the Game Awards to do what I would like it to do, which is to take a couple of months off and have it occur late February every year. That way you put less pressure on a end of the year game to receive an award, because there really isn't a value here in winning a game award, and you won't get that prestige because you just couldn't get the packaging turned around fast enough, not in actual storefronts. If somebody is in the middle of December still shopping for Christmas gifts, that like there's 12 more days till December 25th. If you're still shopping for Christmas gifts, nobody is going to go slap a Game Awards sticker on a video game box and change anybody's opinion as to whether they should buy that game or not. So why not just wait till February, and then you can say the 2023 Game Award winners get a new packaging, get a new sticker on their packaging, and they get a boost in sales closer to, I guess, Valentine's Day or something, whenever you might just randomly buy a video game outside of the Christmas holiday. Of course, that's more of an argument that the Game Awards should happen about 2 months earlier. That too would make some sense. But then you can't really say a game of the year award is happening. Whoops. Well, you know what I can do? I can just activate this now. But yeah, that still should work. I also, coincidentally, was talking about how I kind of bemoaned the fact that Lego, as a toy manufacturer, is probably going to end up laying off some people pretty quickly, just because they just can't squeeze any more money out of Lego fans, and the sets have gotten too expensive, and they just either have a need or a desire for a massive amount of more income. And then in that, I jokingly said, notably, that I kind of just don't care if the same thing was true for Hasbro, because Hasbro as a board game and toy manufacturer is not really something I care about or like. Although in all fairness, I haven't really looked at Hasbro's toys, so they might actually be a decent action figure doll manufacturer. Well, coincidentally, having no inside knowledge or in any way kind of knowing anything at all, Hasbro announced layoffs and did lay off about, I think it was 100 employees. Of course, it's easy to see, like, layoffs are coming to everybody. Like, we are definitely going to hit a point where it's going to be an extreme rarity where anybody has not been fired or laid off, and it's going to, I think, grow into higher levels of absurdity in the United States in particular, for people to sing the myth of the American dream that you can just work at some job or a job until you're 65, 75 and retire and live a happy life that way, because more and more I definitely think it's going to be much more like Japan's current generation, in which they've seen the previous generations work themselves to death and get really nowhere with it and not succeed very well. And ironically, the problem from the outside looking in Japan feeds on itself in that everything is expensive in Tokyo, just living there, eating, having housing, but all the jobs are also in Tokyo, whereas if it were easy as said as it is, easy as done as it is said, you could definitely make cheaper housing and cheaper cost of living locations outside of Tokyo in Japan, and just have jobs there, just create jobs in other cities, but they just won't do it. And that's pretty much true in the United States too, is that if you want to be in the big pond effectively, you kind of need to be in one of the top 10 biggest cities in the United States. Yes, you can move into the middle of nowhere, but you're going to have to be a farmer and grow your own food, or you're going to have to be a logger. You're going to have to work some incredibly dangerous physical laborious job. And I guess that is perhaps an example of capitalism feeding in on itself, is that transportation costs are always going to be accounted for by employers, so they're not going to start a factory in a small town where there's just not as much road infrastructure and there aren't that many people to start off with that you could potentially cycle through, fire, and then replace. But I suppose, and I'll make a short pitch here today for universal basic income, if such a thing existed, then you could pretty much buy a house in the middle of nowhere. If a universal basic income covered enough of your needs, but then you still have to get food, water, resources, medical help. There's a striking amount of consolidation that has been allowed for some insane reason amongst hospitals, and as such, if you're in the middle of nowhere, you're also taking your life into your hands. One random accident may put you in one bad hospital that is the only hospital in the entire area. Anyways, for the catch-up section, the accountability section, I actually kind of like the phrase accountability section. I think I'm going to continue to use that, even if it is more of a joke than a reality. I'm still working on my smart on-air sign. I basically have the rest of today after the stream and tomorrow maybe to get something working. I think I'm probably gonna just have to abandon any hope of having security on a couple of prototype units, just so I have a prototype unit ready to go. Which, yeah, you have a potential huge business, could be millions of dollars, theoretically at least, and you're unwilling to just risk it by doing the one thing I absolutely shouldn't do. And I guess the logical thing to do is weigh the cost of waiting versus the cost of figuring out how to get the encryption to actually work. The problem I've been running into is effectively I have to start over again with the code. Like, I have perfectly working code on the Arduino, but the Arduino has helper libraries and does not support secure boot and flash encryption. In fact, I asked for it in 2 different places and got nicely told no, that they just weren't going to do it. And I kind of get it, but I kind of don't. But that is the case a lot of times with programmers, is that their project, their rules, is pretty common. Do we ever have a way to mute that? Let me see if there's... Let's see. If we could... If we turn the sound effect all the way down. see what that looks like. No, I don't like that at all. I wish there was a way just to mute these guys. They're gonna make big noise. And that's the other player's avatar making noise. Mine over here only makes noise if I click on it. So I spent probably the last day and a half taking the code that works perfectly fine in Arduino and trying to use CMake, which is a C compiler process where you make some files that tell it where other files are and compile everything, and it's all in a command prompt. You lose the fancy IDE of Arduino that would highlight errors. It's really not too much of the difference there. Like when you get an error in CMake, it's telling you the line in the column that the text is on. So if you use something like Notepad++, you can find it pretty easily anyways. But it all feels very disconnected. It's not just a simple upload the file button. It's type in some code and see if it works, and inherently it's not working. I spent the past day and a half trying to use it with the ESP IDF version 5.1, which is technically the new one you should be using, but the version 4.4 from 2001 is really the one that's I'm probably going to have to use, because the couple of helper libraries I'm using just haven't been updated to 5.1, and yeah, I think that is in part because Arduino hasn't been updated to 5.1. Which, yeah, going from 4.4.6 to 5.0.0 does highlight that they were eager to make some significantly code-breaking changes, and probably for good reason, but I couldn't really tell you what the reasons were. So I spent the past day and a half trying to use the new 5.1. It didn't work, so now I've started the process of doing the 4.46 and just banging my head against the code to get it to compile. In part, some of this is definitely just slightly changing which libraries are being used. The file system library is built in, and the helper file system library I was using before isn't built in. It makes a lot of sense to not use header files. It does create a stupid scenario potentially happening, and we've seen this in games too, where people make a program and they're using perhaps the wrong code that shouldn't end up in the end code, that is not compatible with the same license, potentially code that's copyrighted, art that's copyrighted, and then it just gets forgotten about and ends up in the final product. So if I had started this whole project ardently saying I'm not going to use any helper libraries unless I absolutely need to, it would have been better. But in fairness, I really only used 2 anyway, so it's not changing that much code. But I ended up stripping out probably 2 more in the process. And there is potentially an argument here for all the hassle I've had to go through with the IDF and the CMake kconfig setup, which I don't understand it. This is a real process of just learning on top of learning things that potentially I don't really care to learn about. But yeah. theoretically, if I could get everything working well, there is a potential point where my code would work now, and then at some point in the future, some of the two helper libraries that I probably have to still use would get updated, and then everything would just automatically update. Because there is effectively a library manager in the ESP IDF, but it's fussy, to say the least. All of this is just extra work for not really a good reason. Like, I'm half tempted to just make a much more simplistic program, flash it with encryption enabled onto a chip, and then upload the unencrypted program via a over-the-air update, which should then encrypt it that way. But that would almost be cheating. It doesn't really fix the problem in the long run. I'm not 100% sure it would work. Nor does it really solve the next problem of just updating things and deploying things. But yeah, the past 4 days at least have been fairly frustrating, and I've put a lot of effort and time into it. All to just try and have security so somebody doesn't steal my code when the actual device, as far as I know, unless I've made some big breaking changes, which I might have, works perfectly fine now, and the health is as good as it's going to get, so I don't have any more desire to mess with the help file. I am mulling over printing as a factor. Like, all I have is a cheap laser printer, which would be certainly cheap to print instructions on, but you would probably want a level of polish to have a professional print service put all the instructions together. One of the things I'm thinking about the instructions certainly is maybe it really should just be A4 size letter paper booklet instead of trying to fold up the instructions into a smaller amount. One of the things is that the sample macros, even putting them in a QR code makes a massive QR code. Just something that is not likely to easily be scanned, and QR codes don't inherently work once you start getting into giant sizes. There's just too much room for error, too much jitter, and lack of stabilization in someone's hand. Plus, a QR code on a laptop or a computer probably isn't going to have a camera and a software to scan anyways. I wish there was a better way to put a program in print. And there kind of isn't. Not when it's a big program. I wish there was more compression on it, would be about the only thing I think you could probably accomplish, is some standardized, perhaps compression hashes that are available online. I've wondered if that is potentially a technology that could exist, where you would type in like "we" and then it would immediately think you're typing in "we the people, the U.S. Constitution," and suggest that and autofill the rest of the Constitution, which I guess that's what large language models are kind of doing. And this definitely is an idea that I had probably 15 years ago, as far as an online autocomplete idea. Not to say that I invented the concept of large language models, or AI, in any way, but or what we're calling AI. Yeah, if you could get actual compression to go that way, super permutations, effectively, of compression, that'd be helpful. But I bet if you had a super permutation of even like base 64 characters, capital A's through capital Z's, lowercase a's through lowercase c's, and 0 through 9. That's so many different things. So many different variables. I bet you couldn't. But they haven't figured out any super permutations on that level. I guess I should explain. Super permutations are when you take a list of every possible combination of the different variables. In a binary system, just 1 or 0, it's not super difficult to think of the total number of combinations there. And so maybe that would be the idea there as far as compression. But once you start adding more variables, it gets more and more complicated, and I don't think there's really a mathematical way to prove you figured out the shortest, smallest super permutation. I can't say that word, can I? Yeah, permutation is just, as I understand it, a sequence of variables, of characters, numbers, values. And honestly, it may not be that valuable to have a super permutation in a lot of cases, because a lot of times there are just scenarios when it wouldn't be used. For instance, like the letter X and then the letter J probably are never touching each other. So having a long list potentially of combinations of how X and J interact with each other might be very useless if you're trying to compress human readable words. It might be somewhat more effective to simply try and have a super permutation. Man, I really cannot pronounce that word. Of just every word in the dictionary. Which there's probably about 120,000 words worth knowing in the English language. So, yeah. Could see trying to do something like that. Whereas your average compression program just creates a special dictionary for the information it's actually using, but the problem there is then it's not universal. Yeah, and as I talk about this, I can really tell I basically have nothing to say, so I'm rambling here, and I'm somewhat desperate to talk about or think about anything other than a smart on-air sign and how I'm gonna have to jump through hoops and rewrite code to get it to work. Part of the thing about starting on Arduino, starting with the effectively the baby shoes on, the learning wheels on, not baby shoes, yeah, training wheels, that's the word I'm trying to use. Yeah, starting with Arduino, starting with the trading shoes, the training wheels on, means a lot of the programs and functions have been dumbed down and slightly changed. This is, I think, a problem with classes in general versus a C++ or a C code originally. I guess it was a C code that didn't have classes. So when you defined a function in C, it was just a function, and it would take the number of inputs you defined and the type of inputs you defined, and it would return the type of output that you defined. You couldn't then effectively call another function the exact same name and then have two inputs versus one input. When they introduced the idea of classes, which I feel like I probably have learned more about classes in C++ programming ever since doing this project than I have ever before. The whole idea of making a class is to have effectively a function that can have either one type of input, maybe a number, and then you can make another function by the exact same name that would take in a letter, and then you make another version of that function that would take in two numbers, and then another one that would take a number and a letter, and you can even program them somehow, I don't even know really how this works, to take in an infinite number of inputs and just continuously work on it'll just work with any number of inputs. Which all that sounds neat until you realize you've just created a lot of confusion. And what you're effectively trying to do is create abstraction layers where increasingly the code, and this is how I've heard classes completely explained and defined, is that the whole intention was to create code that somebody else would write, and then you wouldn't really know what was going on. You would just know that the code spits out the thing you hope it should spit out. And yeah, as a small single programmer, I don't see any reason for that, or I don't like that idea. I can see potentially if you're working on multiple people are working on code, that might make some sense, but it does then introduce this problem in that everybody still has to kind of know what the classes do, and has to still follow a lot of strict guidelines as far as how code is written. So there really isn't, I think, as much of abstraction as you'd think. It's more of a case, I would suspect, where a lot of the time, it's enough abstraction so you don't quite know what the code is, but not enough abstraction that it just magically works. So yeah, I'm not particularly a fan of classes. Of course, at some point here I might spend a lot of energy. I don't know what I could really do to justify this, though. Rewriting my program completely in Rust, which would just be learning a whole new language. And yeah, I don't think there really would be a good reason to do that. That doesn't seem logical. To completely jump languages. It would only be doing it for some level of security that I just don't think is going to be that necessary. One of the things there certainly is you probably are better off writing like programs in Rust if it's a big program that's going to interact with an operating system and potentially have buffer overflow or underrun errors that could trigger other bits of code and could break out of other security sandboxing. But if you're programming for an embedded ESP32 chip, the CPU is going to detect most problems anyways, or it's just going to crash. I mean, it's not going to execute other code. And even if it could, even if there was some way to inject code through a buffer overrun, I don't know what it really is going to help you accomplish. Yes, in theory, you wouldn't want these smart on-air signs like other Internet of Things devices to be vulnerable to being hacked and being used in some kind of botnet or something, but yeah, I can't really worry about scenarios like that where even if it did happen, it just wouldn't be that big of a deal. I'm probably gonna fall asleep after the stream, so I need to probably just start talking about the news. Yeah, we're still in that situation where the way I'm gonna stream has changed quite a bit due to YouTube forcing me to censor myself. The Epic Games Store is giving away like 12 games, I believe, for free over the next few days, over the remainder of the Advent calendar, I guess, is what it would be. Probably lost it. So, Wulong Fallen Dynasty here says they're currently working to solve several bugs, such as not being able to launch the game in certain environments. They have a long list here of instructions. Got nothing. Got absolutely nothing here. Should have something. But in fact, I probably should just attack him. Let's see. Ubisoft has registered domain names for Might and Magic Fates. Its Shanghai studio was previously hiring for a new Might and Magic AAA game. Might and Magic Heroes, or Heroes of Might and Magic, as a series probably shouldn't come back, so I could see, with the resurgence of Dungeons and Dragons being more talked about since that movie came out and was pretty good, it definitely makes sense for them to try and do a fantasy story. I also could see on a wider scale, fantasy just becoming a next big thing, as people are increasingly bored with superhero movies. Wouldn't be surprised if it does kind of just starts the bounce back and forth between fantasy and mystical, magical sci-fi, which I think a lot of this superhero stuff would probably fall more into sci-fi in people's minds. So, for the most part, you can't really act on this. That being said, I eagerly await the idea of them trying to take the characters and settings of Might and Magic, which is really not that much in my mind. As somebody who played Might and Magic 3, I mean, it's just some fantasy characters is all I remember, and it's a fantasy game. It's, a strategy, hex grid based RPG game, I guess is what you might call it, as far as what Heroes 3 was. But yeah, I couldn't name a specific character if any of the characters had names or any backstory. One of the things about Heroes of Might and Magic 3 is that the Gold Deluxe Edition, whatever the biggest edition was, had a lot of different scenarios with stories that you could pay attention to, but I didn't pay any attention to it because the game was so long anyways. I really was just wasting my life away playing Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Probably spent 6 months playing that game alone. And in that 6 months, had I instead been playing Dungeons and Dragons, I probably would have had more of a social skills and made more friends that way. But yeah, I would expect it is just going to try and be a Baldur's Gate competitor, and yeah, probably is coming out more around the success of Baldur's Gate than Dungeons and Dragons movie even. But yeah, I imagine it is definitely thinking it's going to try and compete against Baldur's Gate. Fine, I got rid of that card. See if we can accomplish anything here. Going for a 50-50 shot here as far as which one. As far as playing other games and watching TV, I guess for the accountability section, I started watching some old Top Gear episodes. I'm still slowly making progress. Watching Ghost Whisperer. And I think I watched one episode of Fright Crew as far as a kid's cartoons, Scooby-Doo-esque cartoon. Can I activate anything else in chain again? But for the most part, I don't think I've watched too much TV, and I haven't been playing too much on my phone. The adult game Tinka Fuma I'm still playing is let's get rid of the question mark there, is updated, although I'm not sure it's really adding any story mode stuff. And that would be my slight concern there, is that it may be just updating on its 3rd anniversary at this point to cycle in and out repeats of events, or just have events without actually having any new characters being added to it. And then Star Trek is just dead at this point. Star Trek Lower Decks, so there's no point in even mentioning it. And then 7 Mortal Sins Ecstasy is adding new content as far as events too, but in that game also I'm not sure if they aren't really just adding, you know, events. It seems like in that game they're adding new characters, but I'm not 100% sure. Again, I still really, even though I've stuck with it, don't have a good handle on 7 Mortal Sins as far as whether it's a game I really want to play for as much time as it takes. And then the one game I am enjoying playing, Memento Mori, is updated to cycle in a new character, introduce a new character, and I don't think you can really get to the end storyline very easily anyway, so they are adding like chapters 22 and 23, but I am stuck at chapter 13 on my first save file, and I'm stuck at like chapter 9 on my second save file. Although in all fairness, they make it easier, so had I gone to World 1, the oldest world, probably would have been a great way to start, and I guess I would recommend that, is to just start by making the save file in World 1 and then abandon it and then go to whatever the newest world is, which they have already added another world, and so they're up to World 16 at this point. This is World 16 after a 1-year anniversary, so they're basically adding a new world every month where you can just start over and make a new save file, or enter the game if you're a little late and being on an more equal playing field with the other players. That being said, I am still mostly stuck in Memento Mori as far as trying to make too much progress. I found on my old save file I could sacrifice a character to upgrade another character, and that got me a little bit further, but it also definitely creates a scenario where I am going to have to continuously get the cheaper characters to sacrifice them over and over again. How much of this do I really need to do? I wonder. I mean, I've won. Unless there was some trick here that I've missed. Yeah, I guess that's all I can do and all I need to do. And I kind of feel like that's as much as I want to do today too. It's like, yes, I may very well be dropping the ball, but this is also a pretty good event to drop the ball on. Noticeably, we're not losing anything other than gems if I stopped playing completely even at this point. Gems in the title I don't care about, and 5 card packs, which I kind of would like to get the card packs, but that's about it. So if I was to perhaps focus more on just getting up to platinum, obviously I'm not going to make it to diamond. Yes, there are these extra events here that are once again giving me small pittances of gems, 10, 20 gems here and there, 50 gems if you win. But that's kind of it. Plus, I'm just not moving particularly fast today, so I think I'm gonna leave it at that. And see, I think there potentially is like a pack that I had some interest in, but I'm not even gonna check it. It seems like I have 27 days on all of these packs. And more than 27 days on all of those packs, so it doesn't seem like there's a big focus there. Maybe it's somewhat logical to not bring out a lot of extra extra things to buy in the middle of the holiday season. Okay. Video Games Chronicle says Sonic 2 Lost Stages were discovered via an old design docs in a VHS portfolio. The Video Game History Foundation has shared the cut content. It is interesting how the Video Game History Foundation seems to be very much taking a different approach to preserving and releasing information about video games, whereas every other collector effectively of the antiquities of video games, if you can really use the phrase antiquities, I think technically the phrase antiquities means between a specific time period that would not apply to video games. But yeah, every other collector either has a private collection or they have a museum. A lot of museums are really just arcades in disguise, or but yeah, there is definitely a difference between having a museum and being able to show a poster on a wall like it's a piece of art from a video game, versus having video and audio and source code, which is mostly what video games are. So in a lot of ways it shows the need to redefine what a museum really should be once you start to talk about video games. And the same has been true for movies and music, but then copyright holders definitely have not really allowed the Library of Congress in particular to go forward and have public versions, downloadable versions, viewable versions of music and movies. Like, theoretically, as US citizens, in the same way you can go to a library and rent out a book, you should be able to go to a digital library and rent out movies and music instead of, yes, you can go to physical libraries and rent out movies. I don't know if you can really rent out the music so much. Moving on, city maps and new ways of traveling apparently are coming to Starfield. Bethesda aims to release significant updates for the game roughly every 6 weeks. I feel like they are specifically saying this now to cover up for the fact that the mod maker who made a popular mod for Skyrim, I believe the maker of Skyrim Together the Skyrim Together mod basically abandoned making a similar mod for Starfield because he did not feel that Starfield was a good enough game for him to continue to work on. It wasn't a fun enough game. So it's also interesting here. You have a very Batman-esque visual here, so maybe there is a tease there that they're kind of trying to have Batman in Starfield. I don't know how you would really pull that off. Doesn't make a lot of sense, honestly. Let's see. Kojima commented on the end of E3, quote, "sad news." This is probably, as a page, just a collection of other people's tweets. Although, noticeably, the tweets here are being shortened from Twitter, but they are no longer on Video Games Chronicle using the Twitter API, which they started charging for a little while ago. The funny thing here too is that this picture of E3 is several years old now because of how long it's been since there has been an E3 event. Let's see. And then GameDeveloper.com either completely changed their website or my uBlock origin is totally broken. Well, either one could be the case. I think they may have completely changed the way their website works. So we'll have articles from them in an unadulterated, unabridged format for today. Of course, I could probably spend the extra time fixing it, but right now I'm in such a crunch. I shouldn't spend any extra time doing anything. Apparently, W4 Games has netted $15 million to help Godot scale exponentially. The startup intends to go all in on the creation of an ecosystem with the Godot engine at its center. I'd have to assume that W4 Games is somehow affiliated with the Godot engine. Maybe they are the parent company. The company was established in 2021 by former Godot veterans. Yeah. Free and open source is the Godot engine, as Yoda would say it. So I kind of feel like W4 Games is not really that affiliated with it. Yeah. So yeah, $15 million to help Godot scale exponentially, or in a lot of ways just help themselves. I kind of do, as a programmer, like the idea of people coming together and saying, hey, we're going to just start over and use a new programming IDE, programming engine, game engine. So we can start over from scratch and learn from our previous mistakes and have better code, less messy code, less code that hasn't been patchworked together over the course of a decade. And the free and open source element of that definitely allows for a lot more flexibility, whereas Unreal Engine and idTech and Unreal Engine, Unity, like plus probably a dozen other major engines that are owned by a single company and used only by that single company. Like all of those are closed source things. And so there really hasn't been an open source effort on that level. And so we could see a lot more code sharing, a lot better game development overall, a lot faster game development. That being said, open source really only helps you on certain levels. There's still going to be a lot of closed source proprietary code added on to an open source engine like Godot for different developers that they won't want to share. A lot of companies won't want to share. The video card drivers and the audio drivers and all of that, and the hardware software has notoriously, particularly from NVIDIA, been closed source. And so that's not something that they would want to share. So on one level, the output as far as video and audio is going to be limited by your graphics card and its proprietary driver. On the other end, your low-level input as far as Windows and a mouse and keyboard and gamepad and all of that is also proprietary software. It is definitely not a case that you can just make a game and run it on the bare metal or in the kernel space of an operating system, so it would be faster or better integrated. And yeah, they probably wouldn't want it to run bare metal or in the kernel space. Even if they could do that, but it probably would lead to faster, more efficient software, which is definitely something we're going to have to see in games and software in general, is that we're going to hit a plateau where we just can't make things look as good, and we can't push as many pixels to an 8K screen without more optimized hardware. We're going to run out of CPU power and GPU power. Let's see, Video Games Chronicle has this PlayStation wrap-up and Xbox year in review now available. It seems to me like this is some kind of interactive thing, but they're not really showing it. It says PlayStation wrap-up is available to access and share, including digital cards highlighting the gaming stats. I'd assume maybe this just goes to PlayStation. Yeah. Okay, so this is straight up a page as far as signing in and getting your 2023 wrap-up of all the games you played. And then Xbox has a similar thing. Not as flashy. I don't know why you'd really want either one of those too much. At a certain point, I don't think gamers should find themselves that accountable. Because if you start to really look at the numbers and realize that you've spent the entire year playing No Man's Sky or Minecraft, you're going to feel somewhat bad about it. A lot of people feel like they should be doing more with their life, when in reality, a lot of times you just don't have opportunities to do anything more with your life, and at best you can either be bored or not bored. We have somebody on the chat saying good afternoon. They missed a G, so it says God after Moom. That's more misspellings than I imagine. So I imagine he's being silly, and it says God space OFTE, no R, and then instead an MOOM. Yeah. Now it is after noom. There is an R, and then it's OOM. But yeah, it's really messing with my poor eyesight. Even on my side monitor that's closer to me, the text on the chat's not that big. Next big piece of news here. Larry Herb has, formerly known as Xbox's Major Nelson, has announced some of what he's going to do. After leaving and announcing his leaving Xbox in July 14th, he is going to sit on the board of Midwest Games and kind of work there, but don't be too surprised when you see him pop up on a few other boards. Let's see. He's joining the board of advisors to help guide them, not a C-suite level position, is what I'm guessing from this. He's not going to be a CEO or CFO or anything like that. At best, he'll be a chief advisor on an advisor board, which Yeah, I wonder if a lot of this may be the tragedy of Larry Herb, is that either he doesn't want to be a C-suite employee, not a CEO, or he just has not enough momentum to be a C-suite employee. He also is tweeting some old photos about E3, photos of him being at E3. But yeah, this Midwest Games Co. is apparently going to be a publisher. And there was a company called Midwest before, but I just don't know if this is the same company. Yeah. What's funny about this is Midwest does kind of imply he's almost going to move, because Redmond, Washington is definitely west. Like, not Midwest in the United States. But yeah, it doesn't seem like he's taking a traditional one job at one place at this time. And yeah, we'll see if at some point he does take a traditional one job at one place. We have GameDeveloper.com. We'll go ahead and start trying to pull out as much of this as possible and get pages looking back to the way they should be. At least as good as potentially can get them. There we go. That's a lot better. And we can do some little pickup things as far as just get rid of the social share. And we'll go ahead and get rid of this. This is so lovely that you can just change the way a page looks for your own personal use, and that the consumer of the internet has the right to that at the moment, at least, or the ability at the moment, because this is also something they would love to stop you from doing. Google in particular is just stop you from taking what is an ADD or ADHD nightmare of a page, which will just show it as it's originally looked, which is distractions, links to other things, latest news on the side. Just how many different clicks can we get? Come down here some more. Looks like they may have gotten rid of the comments completely in this new refreshing of Game Developer. But yeah, you take all that distraction nightmare into just this. Yes, there is a reading mode in Firefox where you can just click this button without using uBlock Origin to just read. You can see it didn't quite work perfectly though. But it's a decent option too if you do suffer from distractions. As for the actual article from GameDeveloper.com here, it's E3 is dead. I already talked about it. I am completely unaffected at the moment by it. I think there was probably always a little more hype around E3 than E3 actually had as far as impact particularly on your average gamer who doesn't inherently need E3 or need the effects of E3. Games will still come out one way or the other. We may be hitting a point here where physical games stop coming out, though. E3 may be very much a reflection in the fact that maybe GameStop and Best Buy and Walmart are all in the background telling game developers that we're not going to give shelf space to video games anymore at all, and instead we're going to, I guess, sell digital gift cards. Which, yeah, at this point that may be the case, that it may just be digital gift cards for digital games going forward. Epic has admitted that it personally created an advocacy group, if I can pronounce anything today, to target Apple. Epic's legal back and forth over Google revealed it intentionally started the Coalition for App Fairness to combat Apple's App Store practices. Now, ironically, it didn't work because, for the most part, Epic lost most of its claims against Apple pretty terribly, and yet they have more recently won almost the exact same monopoly claims against Google. In part, this is, I think, because Apple just didn't actively act as a monopoly as much, or at least they didn't find it in records of Apple acting as much as a monopoly as much as Google did, because inherently with Apple having that vertical monopoly of both being the hardware manufacturer of iPhones and the App Store creator and software creator of the storefront for apps on iPhones, they didn't have to communicate with anybody outside of their company trying to make a third-party app store. Whereas Google, open sourcing the operating system, or the Android operating system being open source, led to the possibility of a lot of companies making different hardware, because there are multiple manufacturers of the hardware of cell phones, each of them thinking at least about making their own app store. And then Google came in and told and paid off people, Samsung I believe was one of them, to encourage them to not make a third-party app store, which would literally be monopolistic. At the end of the day, I think Fortnite and Epic is going to do as good as it has been doing for the past few months, and it's not going to really succeed. It would be interesting to see if this actually does lead to some kind of breakup between Google and the Android team at Google, which would probably be a good idea, frankly, because being in Google leads to your project more than likely getting underfunded, underdeveloped, or canceled outright. So if, say, the Android team all of a sudden became its own company and wasn't connected to Google AdSense and wasn't connected to like YouTube and all of the other products Alphabet/Google has, then they would have to struggle to try to find money, yes, but then struggle to also make better products. It's been a long time since anything really that important or new has been announced for Android, and at a certain point operating systems probably are just finished. The cake is done. There's not that much more you can add to it. There isn't too much more I really would want from a cell phone. Yes, you could put artificial intelligence in it maybe in 5 to 10 years, and then directly talk to your phone and have it understand you and interact at that point. But they've been trying to do that with the Google Home and Alexa type devices for a long time, and nobody really has used them or embraced that idea. Otherwise, the next step forward, I think, is that we're going to more than likely start to have the beginnings of good VR headphone sunglasses of some sort, and cell phones will have a screen, but it won't need to be any better than they are now, in favor of you just putting on 3D glasses and augmented reality VR glasses and seeing things that way, and just always wear the VR head glasses. They'll just go clear when you're not using them. Unless they want to make a bendable phone that turns into a VR glasses, which I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tried something like that, where you just took a flat phone and it had a notch in the middle of it to fit your nose, and it bent and turned into glasses. But that's kind of where I think we'll probably go. Either that, or we're going to have chips in our head, and then it will send data directly into our brains, audio and video, which we're probably 100 years from that being realistic. Or I suppose we could see increasing Steam Deck implementations where everybody is willing to carry a very large device like a Steam Deck just because of the gaming aspect, instead of having a small cell phone in their pocket. Or we see a lot of functionality being added to a Steam Deck device, and then the cell phone not being thought of as really a gaming device as much, which I doubt it would go that direction. Anyways, I'm rambling. Let's move on. Let's see. Bobby Kodak's post-Activision career could involve the Premier League football of West Ham United London. The long-standing games boss has been linked with an investment in West Ham United. As I understand it, though, Bobby Kotick is rubbing elbows with everybody, and that's the one thing he's really good with, so I wouldn't be surprised if this is just an investment, or an investment to get him to be on friendlier terms with certain rich people. If he lived in the UK, it might be a bigger deal, but yeah, I just don't think we're gonna see him all of a sudden being a partial owner or full owner of West Ham United and retiring at the... Now there is an interesting thing here in that you have a picture of him in a zipped up sweater effectively here, and you have a very laid back Bobby Kotick versus the business suit not smiling Bobby Kotick that we've seen from Activision Blizzard shots. It is strikingly different. That being said, I'm not sure that this isn't a picture from years earlier. Like, this honestly looks like this is a more recent photo than this is, but who knows. Let's see. The ZeniMax Union has struck a tentative agreement over AI usage in the workplace. Let's see. The union has netted a second victory in a number of days, as it can now decide on how AI gets used in its production workflow. I can tell you, I already don't really like the way this is going with this page. Let's see. Or with what they've done here. They've probably done better HTML, in all fairness, with GameDeveloper.com, but noticeably they've taken some background images here, square images, and they've put them through a process where it's been upscaled. Yeah. And what that's done, it's created this soft gray element here that I don't know if I could work my way around this. It definitely doesn't feel like any of my plugins could fix that. So just like anything, any square image they have is now being rendered at a wider resolution, and I don't even know if this really is 16 by 9 or 9 by 16. It still doesn't really get to the fact that there's a decent amount of white space on the edges. Although, in fairness, I think that's probably a smart move. I don't think if the HTML really went from the edge to the edge of the page, it would be easier to read because of that. That's too far apart, depending on how big your screen is and how close your head is to the screen. Yeah, Video Games Chronicle, same thing. E3 is dead. It's been officially confirmed by the organizers. Now, if there was a thing I'd like to see a website pay fix, it would be Video Games Chronicles situation here, where they've never been able to get this gray to go away, or I've never been able to get this gray to go away. Yep. Or get rid of this dumb notch they put in their photos. Anyways, moving on. The newer CEO of YouTube is hanging out with the Good Mythical Morning crew, which, yeah, I guess that's fine. I mean, it does make a lot of sense to meet up and talk with some of the most successful YouTubers. That being said, one of the major problems that people had with Susan Wojcicki when she was the CEO of YouTube was that she very much was hanging around celebrities and celebrities who often weren't even really successful on YouTube, like The Rock, and pretty much ignoring medium-sized and small content creators, which, yeah, I think that is still going to be the case with Neil Mohan too, is that they pretty much, from the CEO all the way down, are going to ignore any medium-sized up-and-coming content creators or anything like that. Anybody new. Mostly, it seems like he's not really tweeting or saying much of anything, which I guess is fine. I guess no news is good news when it comes to YouTube. Here's E3's official tweet picture. Not really much to say here. I don't know what WP means, if this is supposed to be good game. I don't even know what GGWP means. It's probably shorthand for will praise, will plus, will something like that. Well played. That would make the most sense. Good game, well played. Video Games Chronicle says a Poke Park Kanto theme park is going to open near Tokyo. The park will be built in the real-life Kanto region of Japan. Noticeably, this is not just going to be directly connected to the Nintendo World theme park, in part because the Pokemon Company is only owned by about a third of Nintendo, and in part because I imagine they don't have enough square footage to make the Nintendo World theme park much bigger. And we might be seeing the beginning of some small resurgence of theme parks around Japan, but yeah, I imagine it won't change too much. It definitely can't just be a whole world, a whole country around theme parks. I think you can only really have so many Vegases. Tourism is definitely one thing Japan could probably make a lot of money from, certainly, but it is also a very long flight, so unless they could figure out some way to make a high-speed boat to take you from Hawaii to Japan in a short amount of time, or a high-speed plane, like, there's some real problems there. I wish there was more details and pictures of what the amusement park looks like. I assume this is just a amusement park in general. And I question really what a Pokemon park would be. Is it going to basically be a zoo with real world animals? It's not going to be a zoo with Pokemon in it, certainly, unless it's a zoo with animatronics or people in costumes all over the place. Is it going to be more like a safari park or a SeaWorld? Or more likely it's just going to be an amusement park with a bunch of rides, would be my guess, and there'll be a lot of static statues of Pokemon all around. Yep. I was wrong. I said 12. The Epic Games Store is going to reportedly be giving away 17 games over the Christmas period. One of the things, though, is I haven't spent the extra time to sign back into the Epic Games Store, so I need to sign in both to get the free games and also to get the Fortnite Lego skin, which I will never use, but might as well claim it anyways. And then our final major news today is that Microsoft is exploring offering free Xbox Game Pass streaming with ads, which, yeah, I could definitely see a kid, somebody who doesn't have money, or parents that don't have money, potentially going with that. But the major problem there is you're still going to be investing $200 or $300 into an Xbox Series S at least to do that, and I don't know if free with ads is really worth it, because you're effectively training your kids to become shopaholics and just doing a lot of mental damage to them the more and more they see ads. And I really do think that if a parent wants to do their due diligence, they should bend over backwards to install ad blockers and make every effort they can possibly accomplish to block ads for their kids, for their own sake. It is a much better mentality to live in a world, a mental mindset, where you only buy things because you actually planned on buying them and because you actually need them, versus buying things just because you saw an ad for them. Even if you're a decent saver and you're looking at like slick deals and things like that, it takes a lot of self-control to not end up buying way more than you actually need or want. I bought too much Lego, particularly this month, because of sales, particularly since I hadn't done so much Lego this year. I basically had only done one set, and I have like 5 or 6 sets from the past 2 or 3 years I haven't caught up on. Let's see. Now, it's not the end of the show, but these are the games that I picked to put on to show off from the last stream. Now, inherently, I'm going to need to comment more, and I'm just going to change how things are done somewhat too, because now things are going to get a second look, which means I'm going to be twice as critical on games earlier, which really probably solves the growing follow list problem quite a bit. But also there's going to be games here that I'm going to just want to comment on that I really am not going to bother to put on the follow list or make YouTube shorts on. This game is an example of a game that's not in the adult section, but definitely feels like it has some adult themes to it, and on that I'm gonna still show off these kinds of games, and hopefully not get in trouble with YouTube from that. But yeah, there is just going to be a different way in which things are looked at, in which things are discussed. More often than not, I think it really will be a case where I still am going to mostly have nothing to say while I'm looking at these games. This one's a real iffy one, but I'll give it a chance. I'm gonna say no to this because it's probably just an asset flip with a visual motif effect over it. That looks good enough. But yeah, I'm not really having a lot to say. I've long since run out of things to say as far as games go. But it is a much more curated experience too here, in that there's considerably fewer games that we're actually going to be showing off now. This is a weird one because playing foosball is a weird concept, certainly in a video game, just because of the different camera angles and for the fact that there really is not a good control scheme that's going to happen here as far as spinning the foosball characters. It still does definitely feel like we are in the point in which no major games are going to get announced or shown, or the occasional ones. Here we have another game that looks like it easily could have been an adult game, but it's not in the adult section, so obviously there is a audience for games that look like they could be adult games but aren't adult games. This one is weird looking, to say the least. Yeah, I think this one's gonna be a no. And all of these were games that I was gonna say yes to at the end of the last stream, and I've gotten rid of several of them. Anon's Nico waifus here. Yep. Inherently, this is part of the problem, though, is that because adult games are by default censored and hidden from your average person with an average Steam account looking at the Steam storefront, it does leave this weird opening where a game like this, which should be considered absolute garbage, is being rated positive and people are buying it because they just don't know that there is quote-unquote better adult games or anime girl games available that will show you actual adult content, which is really what you're looking for. Very few people are into the idea or in the mood for lewd but not nude style content. There's a time and a place when that could certainly be fun, but yeah, unless you have specific fetishes or specific hang-ups or don't know about the nude content, you probably just want the nude. anyways, our charts here I think are continuing to stay high, although perhaps we're seeing a little bit less players in the past couple days. Maybe over the weekend was a big weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if this weekend's a big weekend and just all the remaining weekends for December are big weekends. And on my chart here, we are still getting crammed together. All the data points are from the beginning, so I haven't dropped off any data points, even though there's been several days here that I've missed information, and clearly my macro is broken. They're seeing large jumps with the finals and Baldur's Gate 3 in popularity, and GTA 5 in popularity, and Lethal Company in popularity. So it seems almost like in this one specific week's time, either a lot of people all started playing games again, or a lot of new games came out and they convinced more people to play more games. Call of Duty even is seeing a fairly high number here. Meanwhile, to contrast that, Apex Legends is falling downward, which perhaps a lot of the players who are playing Apex Legends have moved on to these other games. And even PUBG seems like it's somewhat struggling. Yeah. Which I think that probably tells you, if you can extract anything from my terrible chart, which clearly is not as accurate as it should be. I think what that really tells you, though, is that new gamers, real gamers, not new gamers, real gamers, don't really care as much about the Video Game Awards or announcements of games they can't play or Game of the Year awards and things like that. Real gamers care about having the free time to play the games that are available to play and the games that are new, or the games that are trending in the case of GTA 5. Because that's where the real actionable possibilities are, is that if you are even hyped by Game Awards or end of the year events, at best all you can do is play games that or prequels to sequels, in the case of GTA 5. Otherwise you just need to find a completely different game, which perhaps makes an argument that they should put out a game around the time of the Games Awards. If you announce a game at the Game Awards, it should just be available to play right now more often around this time of the year. Which I wouldn't be upset with that idea in general, is that I don't know how valuable the hype cycle really is. And see, now this is a weird thing too. Like, technically I am logged in, so I don't know why the personal recommendations are not working here. Yeah, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because it says I'm not logged in, but I swear I am. But maybe I'm not. I mean, how am I putting things on the follow list? Well, and removing things from the follow list if I'm not signed in? And there's nothing really new to say about the Steam Deck OLED. I doubt it's going to go on sale, and I doubt we'll get any more major reviews from it. Video Games Chronicles articles, let's go through these fairly quickly. Target has dropped the Xbox Series X price to $350 for today only. It's only available for customers who signed up to the retailer's free reward scheme also. So it's probably too late for most people. Talked about Might Magic Fates. Xbox is offering workarounds for Baldur's Gate 3 lost save file issues ahead of a new fix. We're working to fix this as soon as possible, they say. We talked about the Sega Sonic 2 lost stages. A PDP or a company called PDP may be teasing a new guitar controllers for Fortnite's Rock Band-like mode. Which, okay. Didn't even know Fortnite had a Rock Band-like mode, but they did say music mode before, didn't they? Then we talked about new content coming to Starfield and the wrap-up websites. Then a free Modern Warfare 3 multiplayer trial launches this week. Disney says that there's, quote, still a lot of demand for Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic remake, which, no duh, the future of the game appears uncertain following reports of troubled development. Yeah, but yeah, I think there definitely will be a lot of demand, whether it's satisfied or not. Disney also says that Indiana Jones Xbox exclusivity deal made financial and strategic sense. The company's head of gaming thinks omitting PlayStation didn't feel overly exclusionary. If the next Indiana Jones game is relevant at all, it will be very shocking considering how poor the last two Indiana Jones movies were received and viewed. In a lot of ways, I think there was a lot more hate for the second to last Indiana Jones with the Crystal Skull movie, whereas the Dial of Destiny movie, I think there's just a lot of apathy. People didn't even bother to really watch it. I haven't bothered to watch it. And then we talked about E3 being done. And then Embracer has finally confirmed the closure of the Time Splitter studio Free Radical, which, yeah, whatever. They're probably going to shut down 2 or 3 more companies before they're done. Tekken 8 demo is coming to PS5 on Thursday, Xbox and PC next week, if you want to check that out. And we talked about this, which brings us to the Gematsu news. The day before, developer Fantastic is shut down. A lot of people upset around this game the day before. One of the major complaints, well, 2 of the major complaints around the day before that I've now heard as more people are talking about it, I've been blissfully ignorant of this game, is that the game copied a lot of visuals for its trailers and did a lot of gimmicky things and just kind of stole ideas from other games and basically was parodying at best and stealing at worst. And then the actual product was nowhere as good as what the trailers were implying, and that they were constantly trying to sell it as an MMO when it really was an extraction shooter that wasn't even that good. So yeah, a lot of people dancing on the graves of the day before and reviewing it negatively, fairly so, I think, which that really is the way that more games should go, is that terrible games should either never come out or they should fail quicker, versus the AA and AAA way in which a lot of games come out terrible and then they just make a lot of promises and then eventually they get decent, or they just stay terrible forever and yet they're still available for sale. It does seem like Steam is having more impact than game publishers and developers would want to admit as far as people reviewing the game badly. Moving on, the game Terra Nil is coming to the Switch on December 18th. This is, I believe, the one where you're actually mostly destroying buildings in favor of bringing back nature, which is an interesting concept, certainly, for a city builder, and that you're not actually building a city. The Metaphor ReFantasio has a lot of information on Gematsu if you want to check that out. Romance of the Three Kingdoms 8 remake has been delayed to General 2024. A lot of this news might be old, come to think of it. This week's Japanese game releases, let's see, are these games. Yeah, I do think a lot of this news may be old. The PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics catalog lineup for December has been announced. A little late, frankly. Several games being announced here. Is Mega Man 11 an independent game? I guess it is. I don't know what you really could do to a game like to make it stand out. Mega Man Legacy Collection 2 includes 7, 8, 9, and 10. Yeah. I think you just have to make a much bigger game than the other Mega Man games were to justify selling an individual Mega Man game these days. Plus, you'd probably have to change the visuals and the gameplay mechanics somewhat, modernize a lot of things. Fallout 4 is getting a next-gen update, but it's being delayed to 2024, which gives me a great excuse to not play Fallout 4 even though I have the game. Although the next-gen update may have nothing to do with the PC version and may very much cost money. Let's see, Tinka Toitsu SSB demo is now available in Japan. This is an interesting art style, but I don't know if this is really that interesting of a game. Let's see, it's on Steam, but doesn't support English. That is one of the things, too, that increasingly I'm going to need to cover in different ways. Is when we see a game on Steam and I want to talk about it, but it's not in English, so I don't want to put it on the follow list or make a YouTube short around it. Legend of Heroes Trails to Daybreak for Switch demo is now available in Japan. I guess this is a new Legend of Heroes game. And then RPG Maker WITH launches April 11th in Japan, which I don't know what with means per se, other than it's a Switch game, so it may just be the Switch version of RPG Maker. I really hope no kids out there spend years learning how to program games in RPG Maker, because that is just the absolute wrong path to go down. It is not going to lead to making good modern games or getting into the video game industry. And sadly, it very well may be a case that if you want to break into the game industry, you're going to have to be independent, or you're going to have a portfolio of games you've been making since you were 12. At least have I would suggest any kid wanting to work in any industry should have a notebook and a diary type thing as early as possible and write down all their ideas, keep it in one place. I know I had a drawing book that I would just draw in pencil pen ideas. It didn't lead to anything though, but it was something, and probably have lost that book almost certainly by now, but it would have been nice to keep it. The game Corpo Nation, The Sorting Process, launches February 22nd, 2024. Let's see. Is this some kind of programming game? I don't think so. I think it's some kind of weird simulation. It's the best way to describe it. I've pretty much given up on the one plugin I was using. I think I've gotten it maybe as good as it's going to get, so at this point I think it might make sense to spin everything backwards and start with tabs on the left again and work my way to the right, like most web browsers work, instead of having everything backwards and starting on the right and working my way to the left. Tekken 8 Yoshimitsu gameplay trailer is available on Gematsu if you want to check that out. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown, the Racer trailer, is available if you want to check that out. And then the Famitsu review scores for issue 1827, giving Asti Libra 33 out of 40, Fitness Boxing Presents Hop Step Dance 29 out of 40, Meki Blaze 30 out of 40, and Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader 28 out of 40. So still not really a great number of games coming out, or great highly reviewed games, which kind of makes sense since we're so close to Christmas. Not that Christmas is that big of a deal in Japan. Toho Spell Carnival launches April 18th in Japan. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if Christmas is just kind of a slow time in Japan because they're saving up for Golden Week. Freestyle extreme sports game called Street Dog BMX has been announced for PC. It's an interesting art style for potentially a BMX game, at least on the thumbnails. Yeah, the actual game is not so much that art style. Yeah, which makes more sense because a 2D art style in which you're controlling a BMX doesn't make a lot of sense because you just wouldn't easily be able to tell the direction the game is going. I saw on Slick Deals a couple of electric scooters on sale, still fairly expensive at like $600 or $700, but the idea of owning an electric scooter instead of, say, a car does have some small appeal. That being said, not much for me. There's just a lot of danger, even if you're a perfect rider on an electric scooter or motorcycle or bicycle. There's just a lot of danger in that other people in cars don't see you and will hit you and will just hate you for not really good reasons. So it's just not a situation where it's particularly safe. Now, if you're in a situation, if there was a country or a time in which cars are less common, electric scooters might work. Depends on how big your city is and how far you have to go and things like that, though. The scooter I saw could only do like 15 miles an hour, and it probably feels like that is way too fast in a scooter. It's also just no protection around like insects and rain and weather. Which, yeah, I wouldn't mind if they invented something, and there's a few things like this, but none of them really succeeded. But I wouldn't mind if they invented some kind of like one-seater enclosed pod car-like device that's much smaller, running on a electric motor and a battery. But yeah, I'm rambling. A game called Tamagotchi Adventure Kingdom has been announced for Apple Arcade, which feels like that's a real callback to the past as far as Tamagotchi as a brand, and honestly this doesn't look amazingly similar to what I would have thought a Tamagotchi looks like. That being said, I really only think Tamagotchis are I'm thinking of like generation Tamagotchis that would have just been pixely blobs, so this may actually be fairly close to what a Tamagotchi looked like back in the day. It's just blobs. I don't think that I have a lot of super positive memories around Tamagotchis though, since they would die all the time, and they were a hassle to take care of. They were definitely a gimmick that only could last so long. So I don't know if there's really a lot you can bring back to make interesting there. A game called Loot River is coming to the PS4 and PS5 on December 19th, alongside a level editor update, if I can speak correctly, which I can't. This is half exhaustion and half just not speaking correctly, dropping the ball. I've been awake since like 3 in the morning, at least. Freedom Planet 2 for the PS4 and PS5 and the Xbox One and Series and Switch have been all delayed to spring of 2024. I guess it's again already on Steam. Overwhelmingly positive. Reviewed on Steam. And then EA's dead. Which that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com news. Which the good news here is very consistently now streams have become an hour shorter. And that's, I think, definitely a shot in the arm for my streams. That the watch time definitely goes up, and I definitely have been noticing more people have been watching my videos to some level. I've been getting more views, which I appreciate, certainly. But yeah, there is definitely an argument here to potentially just get rid of Yu-Gi-Oh and have a 1 hour stream or around 1 hour, but I don't think I would do that at the moment. I'd have to really think about it if I was going to do that. Like, inherently right now, if I was to just stop playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I'd probably start playing Yu-Gi-Oh on my phone and just waste more time every day playing it there than I do here during streams. Anyways, I was close to wrapping up. Tinder Claws has formed a new collective agreement with its worker-led union, which I think we had already talked about this GameDeveloper.com article the day before. Dev Fantastic shuts down after the game's launch weekend. Yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of lawsuit here where they were planning on launching the game to meet some kind of publisher requirement because they were getting some kind of funding from a publisher, and then they immediately shut down after that point, which at a certain level you could probably do that and still be within the letter at least of the law, if not the spirit of law, because you could make a company and go, well, we're going to try and make this game, but mostly we're just going to pay ourselves a huge salary and take the publisher's money and run, and we'll deliver a game, so we'll deliver what's contractually required, but it'll be terrible. Then we'll just shut down the company, and the money we've paid out in salaries to ourselves and the other employees will have been already drained out. You could certainly do that. I don't know if that's the best plan ever. The better plan would be to make a good game and maintain your company and get another publisher to fund you to make another game for a few more years and just keep on doing that. I need to reevaluate now if most websites have a white background. I think it really hasn't changed any, but yeah, it definitely might be a case that GameDeveloper.com's background was darker and black, but no, I think it was white. According to GameDeveloper.com, about half of the day before players bought then refunded the game. Here they're calling it a controversial MMO. One of the other complaints around the game Days Gone was that it had a 2-hour long single player mission mode, long enough to get you outside of that 2-hour no questions asked refund window, which I wouldn't be surprised if more games do that, really. Embark Studios says that AI lets devs, quote, do more with less when making the game the finals. Which, yeah, I guess that is the case here. This may be the very first case of a game that's admitted to have used AI in its development that has also been somewhat embraced by the gaming community. That being said, had I not just seen this headline right now, I wouldn't have known that the finals had AI in it. There's nothing in here that looks really like there is actual AI in it, but it mostly just looks like a shooter game, a team shooter style game, and I still don't know anything about the theme or the story or the characters or anything like that, if there is anything like that. Yeah, there's a podcast that GameDeveloper.com is promoting, which my macro didn't run correctly, so I opened these tabs myself, and otherwise this wouldn't have opened. And then here's old news that Starbreeze's Brothers of Tale of Two Sons is getting a 2024 remake. Alright, and yeah, almost 2 hours on the dot. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.